Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the edfranklin.nolimits podcast. You can always reach me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest or a guest that wants to be on my show or would be a good guest, let me know and I'll contact them. I'll reach out to them. And today, surprisingly enough, I have a great guest on today. And I'll give a little intro of how this is Howard Owens. How we met was over 50 years ago, if you can believe that. And I was going through my phone the other day and he had contacted me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, did you go to Euclid Elementary School?" And I said, "I did." And we started talking and I said, this would be a great podcast, I think, to kind of reunite and talk about when we were kids. And some of you obviously weren't even alive when we met, but I think it's going to be a fun podcast. So Howard, thanks for reaching out to me. I think this is awesome. And welcome to my podcast. We'll just kind of chat for a while and just kind of see where it goes.
It's great, Ed. I appreciate you coming on. It's great to reconnect with you. I told you this in our LinkedIn messages that, you had a big impact on me in elementary school. I was bullied a bit in school, and you and Roy Nahara and a couple other guys just always embraced me as friends and were always nice to me. And, I told you this the other day that back then I didn't have the word for it, but I think you were really charismatic. And so I'm not surprised you went into sales and are doing what you do now and being successful at it. And congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And, I lost touch, obviously, with so many kids because we moved when I was in 7th grade. We moved to Poway. And you just told me you had made some moves too. So, it's unusual to be our age and still be able to connect. And obviously the internet has done that for us and social media. And this is what I always talk about, the positive sides of social media. It gets a lot of bad press, but I have more friends probably in high school now than I had in high school because of social media. I'm able to reach out. So something you brought up on LinkedIn messaging is how we used to play sports. And I try to tell my kids and tell other kids how we used to, in elementary school, we used to travel to other schools and play sports. Right. And it's kind of unheard of right now. You wouldn't have a kid caught dead going to another school without his parents and basically an entourage of aunts and uncles to go play sports. And I used to ride my bike all over San Diego to go play softball or team ball or football, flag football or whatever. I know you played softball. Did you play some other sports with us too?
Played flag football. But softball was always my sport. That was my favorite thing. And as I remember it, I was the number 3 hitter and you were the number 4 hitter. And we thought we were quite the duo. We thought we were legends.
We are legends, man. I'll tell you, we had some great teachers back then. Do you remember Mr. Henderson, who was a 5th grade teacher, and he was built like a rock, right?
Right. And
his punishment to us was always doing something physical, like you'd have to stand on your toes with your nose in a ring or hold your hands out. He used to do that. Who could hold their hands out the longest?
One thing I always think about before we got on, we talked about the principal. How'd you say? I don't have my glasses on.
Mr. Koskinen, yeah.
Koskinen. What some of your younger audience members may not be able to relate to this, but do you remember he had the Board of Education?
I know.
He had a paddle in his office.
Oh,
I got threatened with it once or twice.
Yeah, I may have too.
Yeah.
He came up to me once, and I'll never forget this. I've mentioned it on my podcast. And he'd always wear a suit and tie to work every day. Mm-hmm. And he put his arm around me one day and he says, Ed, you're going to be a leader. You're one of those people that's a leader. And this was in like 5th grade. And I never forgot him saying that. I thought it was not to be conceited. It was just one of those, that's what teachers should be doing, right? Encouraging us to be successful and to follow things. And I'll never forget that. We had a couple, this teacher, actually, you sent me the picture of Mrs. Gaudier. She was kind of out there she was a little weird. She was nice, I remember, but she used to wear like all these layers of clothes, like I just remember her being a little odd, but maybe it was me. I mean, I was only 10 or 12. So
yeah, I don't remember her. I remember Mr. Walker. And maybe it was this teacher. I did one summer I helped a teacher get ready for this before 6th grade. I helped her get ready for the school year, and then was in her class, and I thought we really hit it off. But then we became disenchanted with each other, and I got transferred. I think I was transferred into Mr. Walker's class.
Yeah. But we had Euclid Elementary was a nice school. It was, for the most part, it was a nice area until a little bit later it started getting a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a great time there.
It seems to have. Last time I was there, it's in the neighborhood. Seems like it's kind of coming back and getting nicer again. And it's an interesting thing. My former stepson. My first street my family lived on in East San Diego was Menlo Avenue. And when he and his wife first got married, they bought a condo on Menlo. I thought that was kind of small world stuff. And that was, I think, about the time that neighborhood started to turn around, because prior to that, when I'd been there, it was really rough for a while.
So you mentioned something and the person I was talking about was John Keister. Do you remember John Keister?
I recognize that name.
He lived on like Shimon or somewhere, Marlboro or something like that. He used to, I used to go, he'd have a birthday party or something. I remember they went down to Torrey Pines and had a birthday party, and I always thought that was cool because I'd never been away for a birthday party. But you mentioned something to me in the LinkedIn that were you doing some writing, or did you work on a newspaper in school when we were there?
Well, I'm trying to remember the other student I did it with, but 2 years in a row, fourth and fifth grade, fourth grade, I published my first newspaper, and that was with Mike Traxler. I don't know if you remember him.
I do remember, and I saw his picture on another thing I found.
Yeah, and he's somebody I reconnected with, though, at least 10 years ago through Facebook, and we have regular contact now. But he lived over on Highland, a block from me, and with my mom's help, we published a newspaper in fourth grade, and then we were going to do it regularly and didn't. But in fifth grade, I wanted to do it again, and but I still, even back then, I wasn't thinking, I'm going to become a newspaper man. That would just seem like something interesting to do.
Yeah, well, it's funny enough, as I had in seventh grade when I was in Poway, I had with a friend of mine, we had a radio show, and at lunchtime we would play music and could come on and do announcements and things like that. And I actually found a picture of me with like a red bandana on, like a gang member or something, when I had this long blonde hair, and we were written up in the newspaper, The Chieftain in Poway, which is still around, by the way. So you went into publishing, but I want you to tell this.
Your long blonde hair. Did you make a copy you can show people to this, or?
I should. I have it up right now. I'm not going to share it though. I'll put it on when I do my.
I don't have my glasses on. I think I'm getting you in that picture there.
Yeah, there you go.
The thing I remember about you is that long, straight blonde hair. And look at you now.
Now I'm bald, and that probably has to do with the 7 daughters that I have and 1 son. So we can talk about that in a minute. But so tell me about. So you went to Horseman after you, and I went to Horseman for about a month and we moved to Poway, but you went to Horseman for junior high?
I went to Horseman until halfway through my 9th grade year. Then my parents bought a house out in El Cajon on Murray Drive and Fletcher Parkway. And that was the first house they owned. So I started Grossmont that year. And I mentioned to you earlier, my dad, also Howard Owens, he had Howard's Bakery out in El Cajon. He started that business in '76.
Is that business still around?
No, it's not. There were a couple other owners after he sold, and eventually each owner kind of successfully ran it more and more into the ground. So
right, that's got to be a tough business. So after high school, what'd you do?
I went into the Air Force, 1980 to 84.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was law enforcement, and it was there that. So I was a horrible public school student all the way at Euclid, at Horseman, at Grossmont. My GPA in high school is 2.4. I always liked to read, but I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and didn't particularly have a career focus. And
none of us did back then. We flew by the seat of our pants.
I was kind of floating through life, and 3 threads. I'll try to just do them real quick. In 1977, I discovered Elvis Costello and the album "I Am Is True," and his lyrics were so fantastic. I wanted to learn to write like that, and so I started studying poetry. And an English teacher at Grossmont, a guy by the name of Bill Gray, who was the baseball coach, he's talked one day about James Joyce's Ulysses, and I thought that would be a really great book to read based on what he said about it. And I was up for the challenge of supposedly how difficult it was.
Right.
Our library didn't have it, but they did have a portrait of the artist as a young man. So I read that, and a little over my head at that age, but I was still captivated by a lot of the language, even if I didn't totally understand the story. And then when I was in the Air Force, at the PX, I found a book by an author by the name of Anthony Burgess called Earthly Powers. And I read that, and again, more his way of writing and his style really captivated me. I started seeking out his books. I own like 40 or 50 of his titles now.
Wow.
He became a major influence to me. And also, so part of that thread, I had written a letter to my oldest brother, and he commented on to my mom what a natural writer I was. Of course, I'd always been on school newspapers all through school. So I kind of had that interest, but I was never thinking about writing or as a career. But while in the Air Force, I got really bit by that bug and decided to attend college. And for the first time in my life, I was serious about education. I started taking college courses in Maine, where I was stationed, and then out in California, and then eventually went to Point Loma Nazarene College. And long story short, it was while editor of the newspaper there in college that I thought, this is really what I want to do for a career.
Good for you. I mean, a lot of, and I know part of the reason for this podcast was to get to younger people and to follow their passion, right? I've had so many jobs that I didn't like. I had to do because my kids had to eat. And like I said, part of this podcast is to encourage people to follow that passion. And even if that passion doesn't equal dollars right out of the gates, it can, because we see that people have turned, their passions into careers and made tons of money. And going back to I shouldn't say this. Well, now my kids are older now, but I was a terrible student too. I hated school so much. I went to my dad and said, look, Dad, I'm got to quit school. I hate school. This is in high school. He goes, Nat, you can't quit. You got to graduate. So I took summer school classes, 7 classes during the year, so I could graduate early. I graduated a year early from Poway High and went to work because I wanted to make money. I wanted cars. I needed cars so I could take girls places, and that's all I cared about at that time. Got married relatively young. I think I was 24, but I did go back to college to become a police officer. But I was in the midst of a divorce when I was in the background check, and they weren't going to take me. And it's probably a good idea that I don't walk around with a pistol. So I'm on board with their agreeing with that. But the sales thing, I was working for Pepsi, and I was in sales, and then I ran a service department for 3 years. And I was going through this divorce and said, I went to the manager and said, I need to make money. I got to get back into sales. He says, you're a terrible salesman. Do not go back into sales. So that was 30 years ago. After selling for 30 years, that's why you don't listen to people that don't know shit about you and what you're passionate about. So I was also wanted to ask you, so you started your own newspaper here in San Diego, right?
Well, I didn't start one. Out of college, this is the big reason I left college without a degree. I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. So 2 friends had acquired a newspaper in Ocean Beach, serving Ocean Beach and Point Loma, called The Beacon.
Okay.
And one of the partners decided to drop out, and so I got his half of the newspaper for nothing, for free.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And so I became managing editor, and actually became the lead salesperson. That was my first experience in sales, and somehow I managed to make a few sales with 0 training, 0 knowledge. And
well, I think that people overcomplicate sales.
Yeah.
If you were passionate about what you were doing, that's how you got the sales, because you
we had to make the sales, right?
Sure. When you had to do what you had to do, right?
Desperation will solve a lot of problems sometimes.
Sure.
So, but we weren't making a lot of money, and I ended up after a year or so taking another newspaper job. But that was a fun time, and eventually the paper was sold and still exists today, and seems to be doing pretty well.
Yeah. So now you work for, or you own this newspaper?
So this is an online news site, the Batavian, and and I own it, and am the publisher. So I kind of, if you want me to kind of jump back to this, I kind of want to talk about some of my sales experience, because that will really set up.
Yeah, absolutely. Do whatever you want. This is an open forum here.
Yeah. So while I was in college, I started doing telemarketing for the Los Angeles Times, selling subscriptions. I really was passionate about newspapers at this point, so that was a newspaper job, so to speak.
Sure.
And then that led to me getting hired to start the telemarketing department for the San Diego Business Journal, where I would eventually become a reporter. And so that was kind of my sales background up to that point. And it had a minimal amount of training, not a lot. Then moved to Ventura in '96 or so to go to work for a company called Affinity Group as online editor. They moved the online department to Kentucky after a year, so I was out of work, but I started a virtual community, what we call them now instead of social networks, started virtual community for RV owners online, and that was my business for about 3 years. Back to a message for kids, I would just, use this example. Anytime I've lost a job, either through layoff or being fired, the first thing I've done is start a business. I haven't sat around and collected unemployment per se. I've gotten out there and started a business, and I am a big believer in learning to be self-reliant.
Sure.
So but after about 3 years, that business started to fail. So I went to work for the Ventura County Star and eventually became director of new media. Oh, important point I skipped over. As that business started to fail, I'd built up quite a bit of back taxes. Mm-hmm. So I took a job for a company called Sherwood Futures in Thousand Oaks. And this was hardcore sales with hardcore sales training. And I really got into it. I bought every book and audio tape on negotiating I could, listened to all this. And I had a sales manager who was just really knowledgeable and quick on his feet. And I learned a lot. And, but while I was doing the job, we were selling commodities. And the thing I figured out from talking to other salespeople and kind of how I was told to sell is we're feeding clients a bit of bullshit in that we would say, give me $30,000 now. And as soon as this trade makes money, we'll get you the 30,000 back and we'll just play we'll be playing with house money then, right? But that wasn't really how the game worked. There was always pressure to get more and more money from the client, and nothing was ever returned. And if you buy and sell commodities long enough, eventually you're going to lose all your money. It's inevitable. So
was this the boiler room job?
It's the boiler room job, yeah.
So these kids probably don't even understand what a boiler room is. Explain it. I know what it is, but you explained it.
The best thing to do is go watch the movie Boiler Room. And a lot of the same lines I learned are in that movie. And who's wearing the pants in this family? If they say, you got to go talk to the wife. In my house, I'm the quarterback in my house. Those hard sell tactics, and but it's just phone call after phone call after phone call using hard sell tactics to extract money from people, and one of the things that was taught there, because I will come back to this and talking about how I do sales now, is when you're dealing with somebody, if they're wishy-washy, you've got to push them either to a yes or no. Don't waste your time on call me back later. It's yes or no now. That's how a boiler room works, because you don't want to waste time calling clients over and over and over. It's yes or no. So it's a very high pressure thing. The day I got my commission check that gave me enough money to pay off my back taxes, I quit.
Who ran the San Diego Business Journal when you were there?
Ted Owen.
Okay, so here's another kind of weird connection. So Ted Owen was also he ended up running the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, and when I was with the Chamber of Commerce, I would go to these breakfasts once a month, and he and I became good friends, and he would invite me to different events that they were having, and I would try to invite him to my events. He just retired maybe a year or two ago. Okay. He was. I liked him. He was a smart guy.
If you're in contact with him and tell him I said hi, he'll remember Howard and Billy.
I will if I get connected with him again. But I liked him, and I met some politicians through him and things like that. He took me to an awards dinner, and I sat with what's his name, the motivational guy that lives in San Diego. I always forget this guy's name, but anyway, doesn't matter.
I wouldn't know.
So the way you just explained the boiler room sales is exactly how you don't sell.
So
that's the opposite. Every kid should have to do that before they go into sales. That's exactly what you don't do in sales. But
so when I took over the Batavian as my own business, because it was originally R&D project for Gatehouse Media, when I took it over as my own business, I had enough money in the bank to pay the bills for 3 months. I figured I needed 40 advertisers to have enough money to just keep the lights on and stay in
Right.
business. So in 3 months, I had to sign 40 advertisers. But one of the things I thought about was, I plan on being here a long time. I'm here to build relationships, and those hard sales tactics are not how you build relationships.
Exactly.
So that was the thing I jettisoned. I'm also famous in the online news world. I've given talks about sales for aspiring publishers and whatnot. We have no contracts. It's just I do an assertion order, because the word contract, that was one of the things I learned. God, I wish I could remember the name of the sales guru that taught me this. Famous author. And no contracts, and never use the word sign. So when I was ready to close a deal, I'd say, I'm going to fill out the insertion order and have you initial it. One of the things I learned working at Scripps, this was Ventura, is you're never going to sue an advertiser for non-payment.
Right.
That all that's going to do is cause bad feelings, and they're going to talk to other small business owners. So if they're not going to pay, they're not going to pay. You have to write it off. So why have advertisers sign a contract? Because it's not going to really enforce it. But if you have them initial an insertion order, everybody understands the ethics of a handshake deal. Ethical business owners are going to pay you, and most are ethical. The vast majority are ethical. So I felt I didn't have to do that contract thing. But the other thing I did, and I use this story all the time, a business here in town called Cedar Street Sales and Rentals, owned by Guy Clark. I went in to see him, and he was real non-committal the first time and said, come back in 2 weeks. That we did that 8 times. Every 2 weeks on the dot, I came into his business and said, you're ready to talk. So I was doing the exact opposite of what you're talking about, just close now. I'm coming back and coming back. I'm breaking the rules of Glenn Ross, right? By constantly.
Every sales trainer hates that movie, man.
But I'm
the ones nowadays.
Yeah. So, but it's still a great movie. I really.
That's 7 minutes and 42 seconds is some of the greatest movie ever. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Alec Baldwin got an Academy Award for just that one scene. That's all he did in the movie.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. A fantastic scene. But at any rate, I'm breaking those rules by going back and seeing this guy over and over. On the 8th visit, he became an advertiser. He's been with us since, one of our biggest supporters. So I built, a career relationship by just being patient and doing what I promised to do.
Well, first of all, when a company goes to hire salespeople, and they go, in 90 days, you're going to need to have this much. It takes 6 months to even get somebody to remember that you're connected with that brand, right?
Right.
And I work for a promotional company too now that I'm an independent rep, Brilliant Marketing Ideas, and we branding is so important in business, and it's hard to convince people. But your sales, the reason I like your sales is you can show them distribution numbers, right?
Right.
See, if you just throw something online, you don't know who's seeing it. You don't know how many people are seeing it unless you have some way of tracking it. And there's ways to track that. But you actually have hard numbers that shows like 40,000 people or 10,000 people or whatever can see in this advertisement.
We do, but you'd be surprised at how unimportant that is. At this, this local scale, may be a little different than other businesses, small town,
Yeah.
There's only 47,000 people in our county. So I'm just flashing on how different that is from, there's probably 40,000 people within 3 blocks of Euclid Elementary School.
Yeah, pretty much. There's 48,000 people just in Poway. And I'm not in Poway anymore, but I'm right on the border.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the first things I did when I took over the business was just visit every important business in town.
Right.
Using, I had made a list of all the businesses that advertises the most, and those were the people. I went in and took media kits, all the information on the business and dropped it off. And I did that probably to 150 businesses or so.
Yep.
And our traffic started going up after that. Now we're doing about 2,400 visitors a day. So that was just a fraction of the possible audience. But one of the things I started hearing was, from when I go make these sales calls, well, I'm interested because everybody reads the Batavian now. And I'm like looking at my traffic stats going, no, not everybody reads the Batavian, but I'm glad you believe that.
Right.
And I didn't dissuade them from that belief. But and now pretty much every day, I mean, our traffic now is 12,000, 14,000 people a day. I mean, we're definitely in that territory of everybody reads the Batavian. But back then, that early stage, it wasn't true. And I knew it, but I went with that. What I figured out happened is by visiting all those businesses, small business owners are the most connected people in town. And so they're talking to each other. And so since they're all friends and talking to each other, they believe everybody reads the Batavian, right? So I never got a lot of questions about our stats. People believed that everybody read the Batavian. The other key thing that came up early on that taught me a lot was I offered an advertiser one time to show him his stats. He says, that's okay. I see from our referral logs that you're sending about 100 people a day to our website. And this was before Facebook was big. And he goes, that's bigger than any other source. So nice. I'm happy. And, you know, the click-through rate in the business, we talk all the time about how low click-through rates are on ads. They're like 0.04, 0.05%. So I knew he had a really low click-through rate, but the lesson learned was he cared more about that raw data. He couldn't get 100 visitors from any other source but us.
Well, you did exactly what salespeople should do and went out and not sold anything the first time, right? You just provided some information.
Yep.
Here's a solution to maybe one of your problems. If you're not getting enough, you know, referrals, maybe here's a solution to your problem. That's the first approach for every sales. I tell salespeople, look, go to the call wanting to make a new friend. That's what you do. Just go there hoping that you're going to make a new friend, that you have the same age kids, that you can communicate. And I mean, I've done this a lot, and I do talk about business on my podcast just because it's so connected to life. And people like to say, well, it's all separate. Bullshit. It's not separate. It's your whole life is about your business and how you react. And, you know, listen, when my kids were doing their best, I was selling the most, right? That's how it worked, because life was good. And you take that attitude, and you have a nice demeanor. So that's another reason you were selling a lot of stuff. There was no threat. There's no guy pounding on your door going, you need to buy today, because if you don't, tomorrow's going to be worse. You know, that wasn't the case. So that's where your sales talent comes in, this is where we oversell sales, right? We say, this is what you have to do. You have to be yourself.
Yeah. Well, you have to connect with people. And I'll tell another story kind of along those lines, early learning lesson. I was meeting with a restaurant owner, and I'm going through all my stats, you know, and my sheets and everything. And I could tell his eyes are glazing over. And so I stopped and I said, do you know the story of the Batavian? Do you know how we came about? He said, no. So I told him, you know, there was a project at Gatehouse Media. They let me go and let me take it over as my business. So my wife and I really liked Batavia, and we decided we wanted to move out here. So we sold our home in Pittsford, and we're living here now, and we're really invested in Batavia. And he immediately became engaged with me and bought with me that day. And I think it was telling a story and making the connection that I'm another small business owner just like you. So you make that human connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Telling your story. I talk about that a lot on my podcast. It's huge. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to a little bit. Are your parents still with us?
My mother passed Alzheimer's in 2014. My dad lives in Bakersfield now and just turned 85.
So I lost my dad when I was 19.
No, I'm sorry.
And then my mom got remarried, and I lost her in 1997. So I haven't had parents around. It's interesting. There's two sides of this. When people talk about their parents and how much of a pain in the ass they are, I said, yeah, wait till they're gone and tell me how much of a pain in the ass your parents were. And I just don't get that joy of, you know, getting to see my mom and dad on a regular basis or talking to them. And we lost my mother-in-law last year to COVID. She had underlying issues, and it kind of pushed her over the edge there. But yeah, I wish my parents were around. My parents were very involved when we were at Euclid, when we did remember that Halloween carnival we used to do?
Oh yeah,
they come out and build all that shit and all that. My dad was a big part of it. My mom and dad did a lot of that. They did the haunted house inside.
I don't know if you knew Steve Gamelson. He lived next door to me. He was a couple years ahead of us.
Yeah, but, sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a very good friend. We've always remained in contact. And even though he eventually moved to Leroy while I was still not Leroy, to La Jolla while I was still in elementary school. But my mom used to make Halloween costumes for us every year, and we won best costume at the carnival a couple of times, he and I.
Well, we'd have that carnival, then we'd have in the auditorium, remember, they'd have like cakewalks and they'd have food there, and they'd have, and I was really involved when my kids were growing up in things like that. But, you know, it got to a point where the liability, you know, they fucked everything up, all the school districts and everything. We used to bring in, at the end of the year, we'd bring in a hot dog stand and make hot dogs for the kids. They wouldn't even let us do it. We had to start doing it in a park next door. And I'm like, you know what? We used to have a bike rodeo for the kids, and won't let us do that anymore. All this litigious crap, you know, all these attorneys screwed everything up for us.
Well, it's also that. It's also the pressure on the teachers to teach the test now, you know?
Yeah.
Everything is about standardized tests and making sure that this overwhelming amount of material is crammed down the throat of these kids in the time that's allotted for it so that they can pass these standardized tests.
Yeah, and I'll send you some information about 2 nonprofits that I'm involved with that about teaching kids human skills, because we have all these brilliant children that are really smart, but they can't talk to each other, right? Because we're talk to adults, or, you know, answer a phone or anything like that. I had a friend of mine that said her boss had left her son a message to call him when he had a chance. 16 years old. We worked at a restaurant, and she couldn't get this kid to call him back. She says, "Can't I just text him?" She's like, "No, we call him back, just like he left you a message. Call him back and talk to him on the phone." Kids get anxiety these days because of that. They don't want to communicate the way we grew up communicating.
I could tell so many stories about interacting with adults that as a kid, that I don't think kids get today. You know, I lived a bit farther from school than you did, so I had a longer walk to and from. I made so many adult friends coming home from school. There was a guy with the Irish setter. There was a guy at the fire department. There was a guy who had me in his apartment one time to listen to his Beatles records. Another one showed me his quadraphonic stereo, still the only one I've ever heard in my life. And
they were looking out for you, by the way, too. You know.
Yeah. And I never, you know, and my parents had no concern. I had no concern. And it was great. And on my street, there was a guy that owned a Jaguar that I became friends with. He worked at the Union Tribune, by the way. There was another hippie that lived down the street that had a Model T Ford pickup truck, and he used to ride me and the other kids around the neighborhood. And he's actually the one that taught me about the birds and the bees. One day, sitting in his house, he opened up his biology book with his girlfriend washing dishes in the kitchen, and told me how people procreated. And
so
and later on, he apologized to my mom, and my mom said, "I'm glad you did it. I didn't have to."
Nice, dude. It was getting so bad in our neighborhood that we had to, we had to get out of there and move to Poway. And of course, when we moved to Poway, there was nothing there, right? It was like a cow town. No one even knew where the hell it was. And now, it's funny, when I was working in the grocery business in high school, and a little bit after that, one of my friends moved to Temecula. Well, at that time, in the early 80s, Temecula was a cow town. No one, fucking Temecula was just, you know, too far away. And of course, now it's populated, and all those places are populated. So, you know, I don't know if I'll ever move out of the state. We have 14 grandchildren.
Wow.
And more than half of them are still here. I have a child my son's in Texas. I have a daughter in Louisiana and one in Portland, or one in Oregon, not in Portland. But so some of my grandkids are out. But my wife will never move away from her kids and these grandkids. So, and I'm not, you know, I love California. I don't like the paying for the sunshine, but, you know, you guys pay in other ways.
Yeah, well, I would, you know, this obviously isn't going to persuade you, but, you know, any young people that are watching and living in California, my advice would be get out. I wish I had 20 years sooner. Cost of living just eats you alive. And, you know, we moved to Bakersfield and bought a house there in 2005. Of course, that job didn't work out, and we ended up selling the house. That was the first house I ever owned. And I was making $130,000 a year at the Bakersfield Californian, and still living paycheck to paycheck in a town that's one of the cheapest ones in California.
Right.
Tells you still how.
Oh no, my son, my son moved, his company moved him, and he's loving it in Texas. So he hasn't been there too long.
My take home pay with my own business is a lot less than I had in Bakersfield, but I live really a much more comfortable lifestyle that I have anytime in my life. The cost of living here is so much lower. So, you know, I'd encourage people, look at rural America as a place to relocate, because you can save a lot of money. And the more money you can save in your pocket, the more you can save for other things you want to do with it.
Yeah, I know. I've been told a million times, and I tell you, I just love the weather here in California and all that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I get it, and you're rooted, and I don't have much family left in San Diego. A few cousins, that's it. So
yeah,
and my family is dispersed pretty much all over the Western United States now. I'm the furthest one east.
yeah. And since growing up here, and being in sales and being in different chambers of commerce and working in different businesses, I know so many people here. I mean, I could be on the phone all day just calling people I know, and it's helped me in my business, of course. But
Well,
we should maybe.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it in the fact that I've been here. I've been in Batavia coming up on 14 years, and I'm real rooted from a business connection friend standpoint. It would be, I think, very difficult at this point for me to move back to California because
Yeah.
I don't have those connections anymore.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we've been on here for quite a while. I really appreciate you connecting with me. I think it's kind of cool. And I think we should stay connected. I think there might be some business opportunities here for us too.
Happy
through
to.
media.
Well, we're connected on LinkedIn now. We're connected on Facebook now. So
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Through media and things like that. And it's hard to believe that I say, hey, I've known this guy for over 50 years. Doesn't that just sound like none of us want to be the age we are. We're always stuck at 36, 37, and we go 50 years. Fuck, I'm not even that old, but obviously we are. And one of the, I always talk to these kids and I say, understand you're going to get older. 99.9%. You're probably going to have kids. You're probably going to get married. You're probably going to, get older, and you need to prepare in some ways now, right? You don't need to just put all, but you got to understand you're going to get older, and you're going to be in my situation. And I was telling my wife the other day, I'm getting to that point, and I'll be 60 this year, where I'm kind of cranky sometimes, right? I'll go out driving or go to the store and everything pisses me off. And I'm like, man, now I understand my parents, right? I understand my grandparents, how they get so irritated at the simplest things, but it's just because it's so ignorant. I mean, people are, not everybody, obviously, but there's so many stupid things happening in this world right now. And you're like, what the hell? How did we get to this point?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have politicians bickering like 4-year-olds, and we're going, really? Is this what we're spending our money on? So I'm getting to that old, I'm going to be sitting in a chair on my porch, yelling at kids to get off my grass. So I hope it's not soon. But
I try not to be that guy. I basically feel pretty young and try not to be, too cranky too soon or whatever. But
yeah.
It's life's all about adjustments, right? And we're adjusting all the time.
I take my grandson, and my wife, and we go to the gym. We'll go to today and work out, and I can work out. I'm still in good enough. I can work out with those kids. Doesn't bother me. I'm strong or stronger than I ever have been, but I'm constantly talking to him about gym etiquette, right? And it's just life etiquette. It's like you don't sit on a piece of equipment on your phone. You don't take weights into the rack. You don't do all these things.
Yeah. And
I just want him to have some etiquette in life. And we learned all that stuff at a young age, right? To say thank you and you're welcome and things like that. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of parents aren't so involved in, teaching their kids those manners. So,
but today's kids, when they're our age, will have a whole new set of complaints. So
I know that's what I can't wait. That's what I'm telling them. Just get ready. You're going to be cranky too. Well, Howard, I really appreciate you. Stay on for a second. I want to do an outro here and
okay,
we'll chat for a minute, but I appreciate you being on so much. Appreciate that you got a hold of me and that we're staying in touch, and maybe it'll encourage some other people if we run across them to get in. Maybe we end up having a Euclid Elementary Zoom reunion or something at one of these.
That'd be great.
Days.
I appreciate you too. Your enthusiasm for reconnecting. That was greght. It made the long search to find you worth it.
Yeah. Well, so you were stalking me. No, just kidding. All right. EdFranklin.NoLimits podcast. You can contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. And please share this podcast as much as you can. It's every podcaster wants more people listening. So have a great week, everybody, and we'll be back soon.